Good evening, friends. I'm back with another tale from my collection. Now it's time to grab a snack, dim the lights, and let me take you into the night with a story I call Gold Fever. Charlie burst into the office without knocking, laid a file on his employer's desk, and stood back quietly to await instructions. "What, pray tell, may I ask, is the meaning of this interruption?" demanded the rather large but stately man seated before his boss. Beside him, a squeaky, thin-looking lawyer flipped through papers in his briefcase as if nothing had happened. His boss simply held up his hand to silence the man and reached for the file. He slowly read through it, his smile broadening as he did. He laid the file back on the desk and looked across at the fat man and his lawyer. "Gentlemen, I am not interested in buying stock in your product. I feel that what you want to produce is nothing more than a passing fancy for those who have the money to spare for such things." The fat man snorted in disgust as his face began to turn red. "Now, if you are interested, I have just come into a rather handsome piece of island property just off the coast of Brazil, which promises to be profitable." JP sat back and lit a big cigar. "This property, prior to my acquiring it, has been owned by a small tribe of Indians since the beginning of time. Until now, that is. This file attests to my sole ownership of this property and the right to do with it as I see fit." "What'd you do with the Indians? Kill them off?" The fat man let his anger show. "Or did you trade them some useless trinkets for the property?" "No. As a matter of fact, they're rather happy with the generous terms of my deal," JP smiled. "We simply introduced them to the creature comforts of modern civilization and offered to trade some useless mining property along with a package of prepaid amenities for their island. They graciously accepted, and now this virgin property is mine." The fat man seemed impressed by this simple show of horse trading. "What does this have to do with us?" "Charlie, please show them the artifact." Rocks got up to make himself a drink. He did not offer refreshment to anyone else. Charlie went over to the wall safe and extracted a crudely made gold chain and arrowhead, which he handed to the man. Looking it over, he could see that it was made of pure gold and the chain links were dented. "That is a piece of gold jewelry crafted by those Indians." He smiled as he settled back into his chair. "We know that the Indians did not leave the island other than to fish among the reefs surrounding it. Therefore, we know that the gold came from the island. I intend to mine this island, and when I have stripped it for all it's worth, I'll build condominiums and sell them to the tourists." He laughed. "I will have my cake and eat it too." "How can we get a piece of this action?" The fat man sat forward in his chair. His eyes had grown large at the prospect of mining gold and becoming rich. Rocks looked to the man and cast a glance over at Charlie. "I will issue a stock sale announcement within the next week, at which time you may purchase stock in the new mining and development corporation I will found." He got a devilish grin. "Or you may approach the chairman of the board and submit an application for limited partnership after the announcement." "Who will be the chairman of the board?" the lawyer asked. "Why, myself, of course," JP laughed. "Have a good day, gentlemen. Charles, show the gentleman out." He spun his chair to look out the window, effectively ending the meeting. When they were gone and Charlie had returned, he turned the chair to face the desk. Charlie was sitting in the chair across from him with a telephone on his lap and a cold drink. "Okay, Charlie, get my lawyer, Croup, on the phone and have him form the Lost Island Mining and Development Corporation. Make sure he has all the wheretofores in it buttoned up neatly. It is to be a limited issue stock with a board of directors to be appointed after the stock announcement. The board of directors will be selected from those accepted for limited partnership." Pleased with himself, He watched as Charlie conversed with the lawyer to make the arrangements and thought of ways to further exploit this investment. When the arrangements had been made, Charlie set the phone back on the desk and looked at his boss questioningly. "What's the matter, Charlie? Losing faith in the old man's abilities?" Gotrox refilled his drink. "No, boss. I was wondering why you opened up the island to the mining corporation with investors." Charlie thought for a moment. "You know, there's gold and other minerals on that island, and you are definitely rich enough to finance any mining operations. What gives?" "Charlie, my boy, after all these years you still don't see it," he laughed. "Why use my money? If something should go wrong, I don't want to lose what I already have. Besides, you know as well as I do that those Indians were involved with trade to the mainland. That gold necklace may very well be what they accepted as payment for their pearls. As an added bonus, I can use the funds in new mining company to finance further operations in the Amazon basins, where I already have made the bulk of my money." Part 2. As chairman of the board, I call this first meeting of the Lost Island Mining and Development Corporation to order. Miss Hawks, please record the minutes. JP sat back and listened to the initial compulsory proceedings. It had all gone rather smoothly since the announcement of the corporation. The man who had been in his office the day he got word about the island had spread the word throughout the investment community, thereby spawning a high level of interest in his scheme. To protect himself, JP sold title on the island to his wife for $1 cash in hand, and then leased the property back from her with corporate funding at a very handsome return. He was pleased with the prospects of this venture. If the mining venture ended in bankruptcy, as many mining ventures did, he would still have the island to build luxury resorts and condominiums on for the rich vacationers. That would provide a delicious income for the rest of his life. If it was a success, it would not only return his investment back tenfold, but save him hundreds of thousands of dollars in land development costs. Everyone is accounted for and the minutes have started, JP. You're the only one with new business. You have the floor. Thank you, Miss Hawks. Gentlemen, we are here to initiate the business of this newly founded corporation. I will list the requirements as I see them, and then you will all have a chance to vote on the proposals I have set forth. The first proposal concerns the lease of the island property from the owner. You will see before you in the files provided a copy of this lease. It requires annual payment of $100,000 in American currency for unrestricted mining rights with addendums, requiring a 2% interest from gross proceeds resulting from the sale of lumber or minerals. How do you vote, gentlemen? From all around the table came a unanimous affirmative vote, which was recorded by Miss Hawks in the minutes. The next proposal concerns the advance of funding for our survey team to go to the island and complete the initial mapping and prospecting, which will determine where we will set up operations. It is there before you in your files. How do you vote, gentlemen? Again, they approved the matter unanimously. The last item which I feel necessary is to set a date for the departure of this survey team. This item is open for discussion. He sat back and waited for comments. After discussing the matter between themselves, the members of the board agreed that the sooner the team was sent, the sooner they would know how they stood to profit from their investment. The decision was duly recorded in the minutes, and all prepared to end the meeting. One more thing, gentlemen. JP looked around the room at each of them. This might not be agreeable to them, as they were here in the sole interest to exploit the island. In keeping with the old adage, don't put all your eggs in one basket, I suggest we send an additional team to prospect the areas shown on the map in your files along the Amazon basin. As he expected, there came disgruntled comments and the atmosphere became tense. I've been in the mining business for many years, gentlemen, and I have seen what happens when a potential prospect fails, especially if all funding is directed to a single endeavor. If we limit the funding for prospecting surveys, we effectively limit the amount of loss that we can incur. How do you vote? Having thrown the issue in the air, he had freed himself from the responsibility should the island venture fail. His own investment of $100,000 was a mere pittance when he considered what it would take to find out if a mining venture would be successful. In reality, his own investment wouldn't even buy a bulldozer and dump truck with the operating crews required. The issue was agreed upon all members of the board, which brought the meeting to a close. "You wanted to see me, boss?" JP was interrupted from his thoughts by Ron Grimes, chief engineer for the survey team. "Sit down, Ron. Make yourself at home." JP offered him a drink. "How do you feel about the upcoming survey on the island?" "I'm really looking forward to it, Mr. Gotrocks. I have the team assembled and the equipment is waiting for us down in South America on the boat." He was nervous, and the ice in his drink jangled against the glass. "We fly out tomorrow to meet the ship and then go to the island." "That's fine, my boy," he smiled broadly. "I want you to do something." JP looked over his glass. "Anything you say, sir." Ron wondered what was up. "When you fly down to meet the ship, I want you to take along a good supply of raw gold ore. Pack it in a carton marked tools or something, so nobody but you knows what it is." He paused to gauge the reaction and saw he need not worry. "If you haven't found a good source of gold ore within a reasonable time, I want you to dig out your samples and play up like you made a find." "You want me to falsify my survey?" Ron was feeling bad about this. "Why?" "It will only be a time-gaining measure, Ron. I don't want to do anything wrong, but you have to understand that the corporation is new and the board members are strictly investors." He sipped from his drink. "I'm the only one on the board who has mining experience, and like you, I understand that it can take a long time to develop a claim." Ron nodded in understanding. "So you want this as a standby in case it takes too long and the board feels it's a waste of time?" "Precisely, my boy." He was all smiles. "I knew there was a reason I give you that shameful salary. Now get out there and make us rich, and I'll see to it that there's a big fat bonus in your pay envelope when you get back." "Thanks, JP." Ron shook his hand and left. Part 3. The sea was rough, delaying the ship from leaving port for several days. Ron and his crew of newly assembled miners, geologists, and survey engineers had their fill of late nights in the local bars and were relieved to finally be underway. They had been at sea almost a full day when one of the toolers called for Ron to come into the hold with him. Ron left his dinner and followed the man across the dark deck to the hold. "Sorry to disturb your supper, Mr. Grimes, but I was in the hold checking to see that all of our tools were on board, and I came across something I thought you should see." The man led him to the box packed with ore samples and stood back to await comment. Ron nailed the lid back onto the crate. "Let's go on top to the deck where I can have a smoke and I'll explain what you found." They walked through the ship to the fantail and stood looking at the phosphorescent glow from the ship's screws. "Mr. Gotrocks asked me to bring that along," Ron began. He explained that the other board members, unlike him, are not experienced miners. If they start getting edgy because it takes a while to develop a claim, I'm supposed to bring out my rock collection to appease them and buy us enough time to find what we're after. "But that's dishonest. I'll have to report this." Ron was getting mad. Their boss had taken precautions to ensure their success, and this tooler, who had no business in the hole to begin with, was going to jeopardize the whole venture. "If you want to continue to draw a paycheck, you'll do as you're told and not mention this to anyone else." His whole life was based on mining, and he was not going to let some green tool boy ruin his chance to develop untouched lands. The tooler turned and started to walk away, and Rod grabbed him by the arm. "You gonna keep quiet?" The tooler swung a wild punch at him. Ron ducked and sent his fist crashing into the man's face. He sprawled on the deck, trying to regain his senses. Suddenly, he jumped up and charged the chief engineer. Ron stepped to the side and watched as the tooler ran past him and fell overboard. Looking into the foam behind the ship, he could not see the fallen man and lit a cigarette. When he had finished smoking it, he ran to the watch office and reported a man overboard. The ship stopped, and men fired up the searchlights while others manned the lifeboat and mounted a search. Several hours later, it was determined that sharks had gotten the man, and the captain radioed the mainland to report a man lost at sea. The ship continued on to its destination. Part 4. Several weeks later, Ron burst into his boss's office and interrupted a meeting. After the office cleared, JP sat looking glumly at his chief engineer. "I'm sorry to tell you, Ron. The corporation was disbanded about a week after you reported that man overboard. I had to reimburse all the stock venture capital back to the shareholders and the board members." "Why? I can't believe they would expect results that quick. It's unreasonable." Ron sat in a chair looking glum. JP tossed a newspaper to him. "The man who fell overboard was working for one of the board members. He was picked up by a fishing trawler the next day and came back here. Apparently he found the gold ore you took along with you and spread the word. The board members rallied and threatened to sue me for fraud." He got up and mixed himself a drink. Ron watched and noticed that he used very little water in his drink. "In order to protect my interests, it was necessary to disband the corporation, which means that you're unemployed until you hire back onto your old job." He looked at Ron in a way that Ron took as the apology he would never hear. "JP, what would it be worth to you to hear that you have no troubles?" Ron was grinning. "If you could really do that, I would give you a check for $10,000 right now." He wished it was possible to get good news. He had worked on this island deal for several years for nothing. "Get out your checkbook, boss." Ron sat back and sipped his drink. "In all my years of mining, I've never seen anything like it, but right now, I have about 1,000 tons of gold ore sitting at the mouth of a cove, waiting for a ship to bring it to the smelters. It's running about 50 ounces to the ton." JP was confused. Even with a full mining crew working swing shifts, there's no way that much ore could be mined in 3 weeks. "Have you lost your mind?" "Boss, we didn't have to mine it. On the north face of the volcano, a cliff had sheared off, and the stuff was just lying there in a great pile." Ron refilled his drink. "All I had to do was use the dozer to make a road, and we've been hauling it to the pickup site for the last 2 weeks." "Are you serious?" JP was stunned and watched in disbelief as Ron nodded. He had succeeded in the face of failure beyond his wildest expectations. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you did and would like to read more of my writing, check out my books on Amazon.com. The link is in the description below. This is the last story from my book, Dark Fragments. So for those of you wishing to read along as I narrate, the Dark Fragments playlist is now complete. That's all for now, but I'll be back again next week with another tale, just for you. Until then, sleep well.